thank you, and thank you for having me. And so I tried to write out my presentation because there are so many things in this regard that I would like to talk about that 15 minutes would really not be enough, and there are a lot of details that I wouldn't want to miss, but I made a selection of the most important facts that I found important in pinpointing what exactly is going on in the world. Is there a paradigm shift in the neoliberal economic world order, or is it just the same with just more exceptions to it? And then you will draw your conclusions yourselves. So, yes. So, I overextended the title of this slide. So what geopolitical commentators and political scientists have dubbed as the pivot to Asia is a process characterized by the shifting of focus of the United States, so I'm starting across the pond, from the Middle East area and from Europe to the Asia-Pacific region. So this is a move that was buttressed by not only a military or geostrategic or geopolitical shift, but also an economic one. And this is why I think the perspective of an international lawyer such as myself and one of international economic law may be of interest, because my perspective has to do with the shift in the world economic order, as I said. So this shift is a seemingly slight one, and I've spent the better part of the past 2 years trying to connect some of the dots and gain an understanding of what its significance is in broader terms. The research conducted under this project and at the Central European Academy has allowed me to pinpoint some interesting details that I plan on sharing with you and that I hope you will also find interesting. So the pivot to Asia started about 10 years ago, and the shift from the policy of engagement vis-a-vis China to one of containment has now become quite clear. The US realized that its hopes of opening up China, democratizing it via its acceptance into the international economic order, its membership in the WTO, the World Trade Organization, much like the efforts of Germany of change through business or Wandel durch Handel vis-a-vis Russia, have actually failed. And neither democratization, neither reciprocation have been accomplished vis-a-vis China. So we now see the US attempting to contain its competitors' expansion with a number of economic measures seeking to protect its homegrown technology from being transacted freely, holding back its adversaries' potential for producing technology, and increasing support for domestic production and innovation. Here are some of the major steps that can be identified when looking at this. So one of the first important steps was that the Obama administration back in 2013-14 expressed its dissatisfaction repeatedly with the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement mechanism, which it started to boycott by effectively blocking the appointment of judges to the appellate body. The significance of this move was that in a few years' time, or by today, after the expiration of the mandate of some of the judges on the appellate body, the appellate body was not able to function, rendering basically the WTO dispute settlement mechanism useless. Then the Trump administration engaged in further containment by imposing tariffs, invoking the national security clause of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade to justify tariffs on steel and aluminum. And in the meantime, also the Trump administration adopted legislation to expand the so-called Committee on Foreign Investment in the US. This is a specialized body which was initiated in 1975 and has worked since, but has rarely been triggered. But now, in the past 10 years, it has been triggered more and more often. And with the FIRMA Act, the Trump administration actually expanded the work of the CFIUS, the so-called CFIUS Committee on Foreign Investment in the US. So while the Trump administration also entered into the so-called Phase 1 deal with China, trying to level and negotiate, this was actually discontinued after a while because the US accused China of non-participation or non-good faith participation in the Phase 1 deal, so it wasn't continued into a Phase 2 deal, it was actually discontinued. Then the Biden administration continued imposing tariffs, but also serious export controls on certain high technologies, such as advanced semiconductors and machines necessary to build such or to produce such semiconductors. And they are currently looking to introduce legislation on the screening of investments going from the US abroad. So it's not only investment coming into the US, but also what companies are doing to invest abroad. And we will probably see something come out of it. There is a framework for it, but there are no legal details on what this will look like. But we'll probably see the US government getting more involved in how its companies or how US-based companies are doing business abroad and investing abroad. So what does this have to do with Europe and our topic? The US cannot go it alone, and during the Trump administration's revamping of the investment screening mechanism, the CFIUS, in 2017, a few EU member states have also gotten in touch with the European Commission. At the time, the Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, acknowledging that there was a compelling case made by these member states for introducing a mechanism for the screening of foreign direct investment coming into the European Union. It culminated in the adoption of a regulation on the screening of FDI into the EU. And since then, investment screening mechanisms have proliferated within the EU, but also in the neighborhood of the European Union. Understanding that, but mainly in the EU, because the member states started understanding sort of that the risky investment in one member state is capable of affecting actually the entirety of the Union. The investment screening mechanism was meant to work as a deterrent and an effective rule of law mechanism against the takeover of strategic business by China by invoking national security, national interest, economic security, strategic interest, or however countries wanted to define their own frameworks of doing this. This mechanism includes under its purview a number of areas such as critical infrastructure, critical technologies, supply of critical inputs, access to sensitive information or data, freedom and pluralism of the media as well. And under critical infrastructure and critical technologies, defense and aerospace are mentioned expressly. So why is this? Why do we need it in the area of defense especially? There are several provisions in the EU treaties and other legal sources which seem to provide the adequate protection to national defense industries. There are carve-outs in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, such as Article 346, and I'm not going to get into the details. There are several other carve-outs in the directives included in the defense package, which I talked about back in March. And also in the EU merger regulation, there are some provisions that provide for more protection in the defense industries. So it may be said that there is adequate room for maneuver for the protection of member states' defense industries. But even beyond protection, this new instrument allows for economic protectionism. So why further rules and regulations? Well, now there is this growing understanding of the connection between technological progress, economic security, and national security, which prompts a supposed need for increased action to safeguard strategic technologies. Thus, we maybe are not calling them defense industrial assets, but rather technological assets, strategic technologies, critical technologies, etc. And many economic activities are now included under these terms. Basically, it is up to the specific EU member state what would they consider as being critical, and some countries have actually included about 80% of their economic activities, of their essential economic activities or relevant economic activities under these laws, so they come under the scope of this investment screening mechanism. So any company coming into the EU may be wanting to invest in the oddest of things, maybe just food production. Anything can become a matter of security nowadays. And there are examples of this. There are cases, I didn't want to get into such details, but there are such cases. We also observed the use of terms such as considerable dual use potential, aimed at flagging certain areas, economic activities, technologies, resources as being strategic or being crucial. Or critical. The expansion of the concept of dual-use items is not that challenging to comprehend, actually, and much of this audience, I'm guessing, knows that it is the development that many off-the-shelf products are used for the production of defense equipment, expanding the notion of dual use beyond the exception of military equipment that is provided, for example, by Article 346 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which actually does not cover dual use. So this means there were gaps in the legislation, and then there is now new legislation that was in a sense meant to cover those gaps, but in a sense also vastly expanded these exceptions in a way in which for a lawyer it's quite difficult to interpret. But we are now seeing this being expanded even more, and we are witnessing a truly aggressive expansion of the notion of security and the assimilation of many economic sectors in terms of treatment to that of the defense industry. This has been called the process of securitization. So what I came across more recently is how, for example, education is now included into this. So in the past decade or so, there was massive growth in China's academic pool with increased funding for certain facilities and more opportunities for research and collaboration with Western institutions. China has in the meantime become the largest contributor to publications in top journals according to Nature Index, and there are also very interesting figures in terms of how many patents they are submitting every year. And so what is interesting is that this push away from China comes exactly at this time. So education is now part of a sort of a zero-sum game. The collective West is sort of seeking academic decoupling from China at a time when more valuable research is actually being done in China. Data is now being included. So the Committee on Foreign Investment into the United States recently requested that Chinese firms divest from apps such as Grindr, which is a gay dating app, or Patients Like Me, which is a personal health app, over concerns about access to sensitive data. More recently, we've heard also about this request to divest from TikTok, which is, again, and then you get into the whole thing of the social media and what the threat of that is. But we can also include here efforts to localize data within the country in efforts to accomplish the so-called cyberspace sovereignty. What I came to agree with is that these phenomena combined add up to the emergence of a geo-economic world order, a world order in which the protection of strategic and critical sectors is difficult to separate from pure economic protectionism. The basic tenets of neoliberalism are in part maintained, but the number of exceptions has broadened to such an extent that we risk the exception becoming the rule, as was put by Professor Anthea Roberts. The term geoeconomics, coined by two famous geopolitical commentators and scientists, signifies, among others, the use of economic tools to advance geopolitical interests. Also the use of economic statecraft, which has been dubbed as the state manipulation of international economic activities for strategic purposes, according to William Norris. The expansion of the notion of security and the apparent acceptability of national security exceptions may mean the overexpansion of securitization and its expansion not to everything, but certainly to anything. As if it is deemed necessary by a particular state. So the question is, is the future one of interdependence or independence, where it's not such a simple choice? The future seems to be that of a competitive and cooperative managed interdependence. And in this, we can see new legislation being adopted, carve-outs being expanded, exceptions becoming rules. While their need can be justified once adopted, their use can hardly be controlled. The difference between protection and protectionism can then hardly be explained. Thank you for your attention.